What's up, guys? It's Paul from Boosted Films, and I recently acquired an FP Black turbo that I may or may not put on one of my EVOs here. And I just thought I'd make a video about my concerns about maybe switching to this turbo and what I need to do to actually run it, and also just give you some side-by-side shot comparisons of this FP Black and an OEM EVO 9 turbo. So I found a good deal on a used turbo. It is always a bit risky buying used turbos, but this is a used FP Black journal bearing turbo. It came with pretty much everything, a full kit. It came with a manifold, it came with an external wastegate, and this has the FP side, hot side if you will, not the Mitsubishi side. So it's a bit different where you'd connect to run out the exhaust. And basically I saved over $1,000 if I would have bought this whole setup brand new. Now this FP Black, especially this one, since it's non-ball bearing, it's nothing new to the EVO game. It's been around for about 10 years or more now. It's basically a proven turbo. It should be able to get you 600 wheel horse or more, and it should run, you know, with a properly set up car in the quarter. You could run 10s pretty much all day, and some cars have run 9s, mid to high 9s with this turbo as well. So this was honestly kind of an impulse buy. I wanted to kind of upgrade turbos a little bit. You know, I'm tempted to upgrade turbo, I should say, on this Black EVO. I really like where my Black EVO is at right now. It's just over 400 wheel horsepower. It's running a stock turbo. It's only running 1200 cc injectors, E85, pretty much everything else stock with the fuel, other than a fuel pump. It has a single Walbro 255 fuel pump. So it's relatively stock, but very fun to drive, quick spool, you know, it has a great power band. And that leads me into my concerns with this turbo. To get the full potential out of this turbo, I'm gonna have to do some upgrades on the Black car here. I would have to upgrade the fuel pump. I'm not even sure. I have to do more research into whether or not it'd be like a single 390 fuel pump or a single 450, or maybe even switching to a dual pump setup. And then also I would need bigger injectors. I don't think I'd be able to get, you know, the maximum amount out of this turbo running E85 and 1200 cc injectors. I'm thinking 1600 is about the range I need. Again, I'll do more research on this. But I'm also a bit concerned about the spark, the ignition. I'm running stock coils right now. I'm wondering if I would need to do a coil on plug setup. I'm honestly not sure on that as well. And another personal note really is just that the way I have my setup right now with this turbo, I have my ARC heat shield that goes over the exhaust manifold cut up, you know, a specific way to work through my dump tube that dumps through the hood and stuff like that. And I would need to change all that as well to get this turbo to fit. So don't get me wrong, I want more horsepower, of course, like everyone else, but I've restrained myself up until this point because I do, again, love the way this car is set up right now. It's so reliable, it's so fun to drive that I just didn't necessarily plan on doing something like this right away, but you know, it was a good price, and you know, that stimulus money came in too, so that kind of helped make the decision. So just taking a look, there's not going to be too much super informative in this video, but I thought it might be helpful for some people to hear my concerns about switching, you know, kind of upgrading to this type of turbo, and then also maybe just to see a bit of the differences here, to actually visually see the difference between this FP Black and this stock 9 turbo. Now, of course, you can see where your intake pipe would go on. It's much bigger on this FP Black, and the inlet of the turbo itself also is much bigger inducer, bigger wheel. You can run the same lines that you would, and actually looks like the person who had this turbo on the car before ran an EVO 9, regular EVO 9 OEM lines, being, you know, the coolant lines and the oil feed lines. Now FP does recommend though that you run their specific line, and that oil feed line, that is, and that oil feed line actually, instead of the OEM one, the OEM oil feed line runs from the cylinder head right to the turbo here. And what FP recommends is that you basically buy their line with a filter in it that connects actually to your oil filter housing. It's supposed to supply more pressure to the turbo and kind of be a bit safer alternative, especially if you run some hot EGT, exhaust gas temperatures. It's supposed to help. So now I'm just going to turn these around, and we're going to take a look at basically what is the hot side difference here. This hot side, you know, this used to come, I don't believe you could buy them new anymore, even with the Mitsubishi, the MHI hot side. So what you're typically going to get if you bought something from FP right now is going to be this setup with the external wastegate. So the external wastegate is typically a nice thing to have because it usually gives you more consistent, more precise control of your boost. You're more likely to kind of get boost creep when you have this internally gated kind of flapper setup. It's usually not quite as nice as something like this. This also gives you the option to actually run your dump tube up through the hood, or you could run it straight down as well, or you can certainly recirculate back into your exhaust as well. And finally, just showing the difference here, of course, with this exhaust side, you can see that, you know, it's quite a bit different here just with the way the FP housing would attach, or you can actually get a full downpipe that would attach with this clamp style here. C-clamp, I think it's called. I don't know why it's facing me right now with what that clamp is called, but that is kind of nice too, because then you don't have to worry about these bolts or nuts breaking off, which, as a lot of you may know, that tends to happen quite often. So this is part of the FP, the force performance downpipe portion that you would need to run this turbo, unless you had a completely different downpipe that already kind of had this like curve built into it. So of course that's just going to connect here and then connect to your downpipe. I'm trying to find out, when I bought this kit, it actually did come with a full like downpipe, not just this O2 housing section basically, but it came with a downpipe as well. So I'm not sure if you buy this, if you can just use a regular downpipe that you may have been using on this setup. I'm not sure if that's the case or not, but if someone is running it that way or knows that, let me know in the comments section. I'm sure some of my viewers have experience with a turbo like this, and I'm just genuinely curious if you had it, what your thoughts are with this FP turbo. If you have one or had one, were you bothered by the spool? I know it's obviously not going to spool as quick as this OEM 9, but you know, could you compensate for it basically with being in the right gear at the right time when you needed to? Is it something that bothered you where you wouldn't want to autocross it maybe because the spool just seemed too laggy? Let me know what you thought if you ran this turbo. Also, I'm curious to your opinions on reliability issues, really. Like, am I overthinking it with this reliability stuff? If I switch to a double pump, you know, fuel setup, and then I switch to a coil unplug ignition setup, and then I run these even larger injectors, I don't know how much reliability and daily drivability am I sacrificing. That's kind of what my concern is. And not only that, but honestly, I feel like I am, you know, this is a stock internal engine, so to be already pushing 430 some wheel horse, I thought was already quite a bit, but supposedly the car that this turbo came off of was stock internals and, you know, was running high tens. So that obviously tells me that the stock internal car was also running close to that much horsepower. Of course, I don't expect it to last forever. I know the more you push that line, the more likely you are to have issues where things could, you know, explode. But that's where I'm hesitant to actually just throw this turbo on right away, because I don't want to lose the reliability and the drivability I have right now of this car. So that's about it for this video, guys. I do appreciate everybody watching. Hopefully you found it informative and helpful, and hopefully you guys can help me out as well. So let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. As always, this is Paul from Boosted Films. Thanks for watching.